Hello out there. This is quite a momentous occasion for me. What I'll be presenting today is the culmination of, say, 15 years of research and just dealing with people in the, book printing, print on demand world, and learning from people who've been through the experience, whether you're a self-publisher or I've spoken to trade publishers, designers, editors, distributors, and I've found some really fascinating new information on that front. So yes, I'll be covering that, but what I won't be covering in detail this time, because it really deserves a webinar or a workshop all to itself, is design. I will be pointing you in the direction of where you can get some more information, and I will also cover a few light pointers, but I don't want to go down that path in great detail. To me, this webinar is more about the whole life cycle or ecosystem for self-publishing a photo book. And but I can see here, all right, we'll hold these. We have some questions about font choice and color management. We'll leave those until the end. And that's something that Lisa, our volume order manager, if you weren't in here earlier, Lisa will be giving us some pointers too on how you can deal with Momento if you would like to place a volume order. Haha, print fonts and size, okay. All right, so look, we have about 40 or so people on board right now. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to start with just a few light topics to get us in the mood while everybody joins in. And if you see me looking to the right, that's because I have two monitors on board so I can look at my notes at the same time. All right. So now I'm going to share my screen with you all. Panelists. And if somebody could just let me know if it's all on board. Hopefully now you're all seeing my screen there. Just bring you guys back up. Now, I can hear somebody's not muted. Let's see if that happens. All right. Now, just so you know, there is also another option for asking questions, which is the Q&A window. I'd appreciate it if you didn't use that one because I can't look at all the windows at once. So we'll just stick to the chat window. All righty, what time are we? 34. So this stack of books right here, as the name on the spine would suggest, is a book by Rob Annesley, who we'll be speaking to later. And it's just very timely that Rob has only just launched his book in the last 2 weeks. So I thought I'd star his self-published edition right there on our homepage. And as you can see from the title there, I'm being very specific in my information today about Australian and New Zealand creators, because there's a lot of information out there on how to self-publish a photo book, but a lot of it isn't overly relevant for we antipodeans. So that's what I'm focusing on today. And I know we have people from both Australia and New Zealand on board right now. Okay, this is just to get us in the mood, but Martin Parr, if you don't know him, is the, how would we say, the king of photo books in the photo book world. He's an English photo book photographer and photo book creator who wrote the history of photo books. And I agree with him highly on his comment that the photo book is a good medium for your photographs. Surprise, surprise. Okay, so why self-publish? It's not just so I can get you to print books with Momento, although that would be nice, but it is truly the most achievable way to publish a book today. And I'll prove that to you in just a moment by showing you the work that the trade publishers and the independent art publishers are publishing right now, what kind of topics and genres they are interested in. The other benefit to it is that you get to maintain full creative control over the process. I've spoken to quite a few creators who've had their works published by a trade publisher, and it's a tricky but achievable relationship to have what you want come to the fore and then for them to bring in their input. So you maintain full creative control when you self-publish, and it's also more profitable because you are not sharing any commissions with the publisher. So here we go. This is just a quick, well, it's quite lengthy, but here is a list of publishers from Australia and New Zealand who do actually publish photo books. There's a combination of independent art publishers here, art book publishers, and then your more mainstream popular trade publishers, and then some high-end art publishers. And just so you can see, these are some of the titles that they are publishing. So Bad News Books is in New Zealand, a small independent photo book publisher in New Zealand who has been doing an amazing job over the last few years, working with generally younger creators. And this is the thing, a lot of people who start a photo book publishing company, an independent art book company, do it because they are photo book creators and they want to get their work out, and then they work with their friends. So it's very much about the network and the community too, which you'll see shortly. So quite a few, these guys produce quite a few titles a year, generally kind of lighter weight, lower production values, but still beautiful work, but more affordable editions. This is Echo Publishing, which is a combination, Echo Publishing and Bonnier UK. They've joined forces. They're more mainstream, as you can see here. They're more kind of lifestyle books. One that we will be referring to later is Men in Their Sheds, and that was the work by Craig Wetjen, and we'll talk about how he came to work with these guys and the success of his book later on. Hachette, another big name, a trade publisher. I went looking on these websites for any photo books over the last few years, and these guys only had 3. And as you can see, there's a very distinct genre that they like to focus on, and that would be animals. Libby Jeffery's work there. Let me tell you. So Lila's book was run in a run of 5,000 copies or so, and it's been one of the, what I would say, one of the biggest Australian created photo books over the last few years. So if you're going to approach Hachette, make sure it's about an animal. M33 are a well-established Melbourne-based independent art and photo book publisher. They've produced some fabulous titles over the last few years. This one here, Apocryphus, just won the Australian and New Zealand Photo Book of the Year award this year. I actually got in touch with Helen and asked her what her bestseller was, and she confirmed that her bestseller was this book, Suburban Baroque, which was published last year. And she believes that the success behind that book was based on the fact that it was a premium format with high production values. As you can see, it's got the gilt gold edges, the ribbon, and sewn in bookmark, and a foiled title on the spine. And as you can see from the image on the cover, it's about photos of mid-century suburban interiors of former working class areas in Melbourne. They produced, so it's a topic that people are interested in. They produced 500 copies and they only have 3 copies left today. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how many copies publishers produce as well, but we'll talk in more detail about that shortly. New South Publishing, look, I hesitated putting this in because New South produced a book that I loved, one of the first photo books that I really got into when we started Momento, 52 Suburbs. If you haven't seen it, it's good fun. Anyway, Louise Hawson worked in advertising, loved photographing, started a blog. The blog readers demanded she turn her blog into a book, and she approached New South Publishing to do that. They took it on board because it was about Sydney locations and landscapes. So there was a direct correlation to what they already wanted to produce. I went back to look at their catalogue for the last few years, nothing. They've done nothing since about 8 years ago. So, but what I am showing you here is what they have for their submission process. So if you are interested in pitching to people, then you've got to go online and make sure you check what they're looking for. And generally they all have a submission page. National Gallery of Victoria. So this is an example of a cultural institution that is publishing, just like academic institutions do as well. But I don't know if you're all Bill Hensons. All power to you if you are. But yes, NGV publish a book in tandem, in a lot of cases, in tandem with their exhibitions, which makes great sense. And as you can see here, they've done different versions over the years, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Peter Sharp, who is online and with us today. Peter published his book Lost But Found only last year, late last year, with Pan Macmillan. And I'm not surprised that they were interested in a book that was about animals, because it's an accessible topic. But Peter made sure that this book was bigger than just the animals themselves. It focused on the Sydney Dogs and Cats Home as well. And that's what appealed to Pan Macmillan. I went looking through their catalogue. I couldn't find many other photography related projects, but Peter, if you know of any others, please let us know. Okay, Perimeter Editions. These guys are the fairy godparents of photobook publishing in Australia. Perimeter Editions is based in Melbourne. I think they're nearly 2 decades old, and they are run by Dan Rule and Justine Ellis, who are a couple as well, but they, just like Bad News Books, started Perimeter publishing under the title Perimeter Editions because they wanted to produce photo books, and they revolved in a world of artists and photographers and creatives who also wanted to publish their books, but there really weren't many people who were willing to publish them. So they established Perimeter Editions. Interestingly, they also then established a Perimeter Books, which is their retail store, physical and online, so they could sell these titles. And then they found it difficult to get the distribution happening, so they started Perimeter Distribution as well. But they, if you aren't aware of them, they're definitely a company that you should have a look at. And a number of these titles here were in the Australia and New Zealand Photobook of the Year Awards. Pelchy Manor, Pelchy Manor was created as a result of the award win. To Brits to Shiraz, Second Sight. These guys are definitely worth a look. Okay. Interestingly, I only just discovered this too. Perimeter are co-publishing with a company in the US called The Ice Plant. And the reason I mention this is because you will see once you start to investigate that it's such a small world for photo book publishing, locally and internationally, and people work together. The other interesting thing, talking about this kind of different fusion of, or co-publishing, publishing isn't really clearly defined anymore. So when I was referring to M33 and Suburban Baroque and the titles they produce, they might take some money on board with the artist, or the artist might bring some money to the project, and then the artist is responsible for marketing. Helen and the M33 team might be responsible for the editing and design or not. It's kind of, the lines are blurred these days, and you can just, there's room to collaborate and decide how you come together to work on a project. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that there's not a lot of money in it, so you have to be clever about it. But the thing is, get to know the people. The more they know you, or they've seen you, or they've heard of their work, the more likely they might be to take on your work. Rim Books is a New Zealand publishing company, small, artist-based, run by a lovely man called Haru Samashima. I asked Haru what his bestseller was, and he said it was Carbon Empire here, which actually won the Photobook of the Year Awards a few years ago. And they, just to give you an idea of how many titles they published, they only, printed, they only printed 100 copies of these. They printed them in a newspaper format, risograph printing style, and they have 80 out of 100 of those copies sold. And they believe that it was due to the attention to detail and the time that the author or creator, Alan MacDonald, put into it. But there's another indication of the number of copies that publishers also produce, 100 copies. Scribe is another more mainstream publisher. I could only find 3 titles of theirs, and you know, they're about landscape and suburbia, so they're very accessible, popular topics and genres. T&G is another Australian, very well established photobook publisher run by a man called Gianni Frinzi, and he works with people, from my assessment, people who are, you know, have built up quite a career and a series of images over a period of time, and then he works with them to create a best of selection. And there's some examples there. Ooh. Thames and Hudson. Okay, Thames and Hudson, big name. I always remembered Thames and Hudson and Phaidon as big names for illustrated books, which is what they refer to when they're referring to photo books and art books. I did not think that Thames and Hudson were interested in Australian content until a few years ago. They were interested in importing products from overseas and distributing them in Australia, but not so much commissioning work here and then publishing and distributing them internationally. They have, however, since about 5 years ago, brought on board a publisher, a woman called Kristen Abbott, who is focused on finding titles that, you know, are local titles with international appeal. So once again, we've got Bill Henson, and this one's Tracy Moffat. So in this case, I think you have to have a bit of a profile behind you before you approach them. So once again, it all links back to the fact that self-publishing is a more feasible way to go. Oops, other direction. If you are interested in pitching to Thames and Hudson, you can see on their website, they have their submission guidelines as well. Okay, international publishers, just to give you an idea, if you think your book has legs for an international audience, these are the biggest names that you can approach internationally. I'm not going to go into any more detail other than to say that Stidle, if you want to see what it's like working with a photo book publisher, an international photo book publisher, there's a great documentary about Stidle, Gerhard Stidle, on how to work with him, and you'll find that video online, and it's quite entertaining as well as informative. Okay, actually, one thing I will go back to, I'm just commenting on, whoops, one moment. Actually, I'll leave it till the end. I want to talk about the numbers that the international publishers produce as well, but I just remembered I'll be referring to that in my pricing and quantity section. Okay, so this is the basic step-by-step process for publishing a book. When I refer to planning, I mean looking at, what have we got over here? Okay, in the planning phase. So that involves figuring out what the purpose of your book, who the audience is, and being very clear on what that is. To me, the most successful or the most important factor when you're creating your book is to clearly define the purpose, and then that helps you find your audience. Generally speaking, a topic or a subject that is bigger than just you and your work is beneficial. And for example, Peter Sharp's title, Lost But Found, was not just about his work as a pet photographer, but he took that to the Sydney Cats and Dogs Home, and it was a bigger picture, and how these animals went from, you know, poor animals that's in bad condition in a lot of cases, and how they came out on the other side to be loved and to end up in a very happy home. He also had some of the money that was made from a percentage of the revenue would go toward the Sydney Cats and Dogs Home as well. So it was a bigger picture project than just pet photography. And once again, make it a topic that is popular unless you know who your audience is. In New Zealand, a woman called Rachel, and I've just forgotten her last name, she did a book called, that was about children who had disability, or as she liked to call it, a superpower. And she knew that that book was going to work because there was a whole community that was interested in seeing imagery and hearing stories about children with these conditions. So if it's not a universal topic or a topic with universal appeal, go niche and know who your audience is. Next phase, editing and design up. And when you're thinking about that in that planning phase, consider, are you trying to entertain somebody? Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to educate them? Or are you just trying to document something? That should drive your design and then the format and the way you promote it afterwards. With the audience, as I said, it's very important you know who they are, but not just know who they are, know how to access them. If you can't access them, you're going to find it very hard to sell. So take your time. That's the biggest thing. I've known people who take 12 years to put a book together, from shooting through to, you know, the finished design and launching it. Not saying you have to take that long, but you don't have to rush it. And generally, oh, Jeff. Okay, no, we have power. Jeff, can you just check the power there? Sorry about that. Yes, so I know people who've taken a long time to produce a book, and generally speaking, the hardest part of the design process, I find, is choosing the images that you want to put into the book. So you've got to choose from your big collection, and the distance between when you shot those images and the time you go to review and select and curate them, the better it is, because you're less emotionally attached to them. So you're probably going to make clearer decisions. So take your time. And also be strategic with your timing. So we've worked with a Sydney commercial photographer, Simon Bernhardt, on a few of his publications. And he did one, he always likes to choose controversial topics. So he did one on BDSM, but he timed the launch of that book to coincide with the launch of Mardi Gras, and held his exhibition and book launch during Mardi Gras. Then he did another one called Gateway, which was about, it was a portrait, series of portraits on cannabis smokers. And he was trying to prove that they're not all, you know, sitting on the lounge, puffing away during the day. He did produce this book to spark debate on the decriminalisation of marijuana. And he made sure that it hit the pages or hit the public at the time that debate was running hot. So he was very strategic about his timing. And another good example of that is, of good timing, is Craig Wetchen, who I'll refer to a little later. His book, Men in Their Sheds, he worked on that and made sure that it was ready to release in time for Father's Day so that people could purchase the gifts for Father's Day. And it was a massive seller. Format and printing, we'll look at these. Format and printing, pricing, promotion, sales and distribution tactics. We'll look at all of those in detail as we go through. How am I going for time? 10:54. Okay. The $1 million question. Maybe not $1 million, but it's a very hot topic. How do you fund your project? Unless you're lucky enough to have personal savings, there are quite a few other options. Grants, you can approach your, Rob Annesley is going to tell us about how he approached his local council further down the track. So go to local and state, even federal cultural and art departments for grants. Award prize. I mentioned before there was a book that Perimeter Books published last year called Pelchy Manor. Pelchy Manor was the work of a young Melbourne artist called Sarah Walker. She actually won the Perimeter host a Photobook award prize called the Perimeter Small Book Prize. She won that with a series of images. As a result of winning that, she was able to produce her book called Second Sight. That book, Second Sight, was then entered into the Australia and New Zealand Photobook Awards, which she then went on to win. And as a result of that win, she won some printing credit with us, and she produced her book, Pelchy Manor. So, you know, entering awards really can make a big difference. And in her case, she said it was what has helped launch her career. So I'll give you a list of Photobook awards that you can enter towards the end. Sponsorships. I was just mentioning Simon Bernhardt and his generally controversial books, so Gateway and BDSM. He was very clever, and he worked with political parties and got sponsorship from political parties who were both interested in those topics. And I believe it was with BDSM that the launch of his book went so well that they ended up topping up their funding for him. So, you know, think outside the box sometimes. Like if you're going to do a book on motorbikes or men or women who like bikes, approach Harley Davidson or pick corporates who are interested in in the same genre. We've just been away at a place where we found a coffee table book about a Kubra hat. So if you can think of help a corporate entity tell their story with your photography, then that's another option too. And that's what I mean by commercial clients here. Pre-orders. Pre-orders is a really clever way to go about it. Just let me see, yes. So pre-orders, I'll come to a moment, and crowdfunding, two very important and I think the most feasible ways for you to get some funds. And just to reiterate, this is an example of a corporate funded book. Leica Q was launching a new camera, and they asked Jessie Marlowe to put together a very high-end promotional book for them. Corporate clients, Katie Kohlenberg is a portrait photographer, runs a studio called Heart Story. They work with their portrait clients to put together these collection books. So they're using their existing customer base, and they have all their orders up front. They know that it's already covered by portrait customers who come in and agree up front, and then they produce the book with everybody's images in them. Loud and Luminous. Now this is a great example of a book that got all of the pre-orders from the subjects in the book. If you're not aware of Loud and Luminous, the book is a collection of work by Australian female photographers. And there's no surprise then that the female photographers who have their work in the book are also interested in owning a copy of the book. We did an experiment a few years ago. I attended the book launch, as you can see here, and I spoke to the women there, and we took orders on the day, but I also worked with Hillary and Melissa, who are the coordinators, and we pitched 3 different price points to them, and basically said that if you get 100 copies rather than, 100 orders rather than 20 orders, the price of the book reduces. So interestingly, between 2018 and 2019, their book sales rose from 25 copies to 125 copies. So use the network and the people who are in the book. That's a very clever way to get pre-orders and funding. Okay, if you do want to go down the path of crowdfunding, I highly recommend it if you have a few factors involved. Here's some examples of crowdfunding platforms you can use. Kickstarter is by far the most popular. Pozible is an excellent Australian-based crowdfunding platform, and I've been in communication with them directly, and they actually are very keen to help photobook creators, and they might profile you too if you contact them, and they will feature you on their homepage. Boosted is actually was established by Creative New Zealand, their cultural department over there, and great for New Zealanders as well. Big question though, how much can you earn? I don't know about you, but I was stunned by this. So $20,000 on average is what I discovered from reviewing 50 to 57 campaigns since 2013 to 2020, all Australian and New Zealand photobook projects. And to me, that's an excellent amount of money, a good amount of money to publish a book and host an exhibition. And as you can see there, there's a few factors involved. I'm not going to go in great detail here because I have a very detailed blog post, a few blog posts on these that you can go through at your leisure. But I do just want to confirm that it is very achievable if you do the right things. Here's an example of a crowdfunding campaign by the Light Collective, who you guys may know. They're fairly well-known landscape photographers in Australia, including Paul Llewellyn, Ricardo da Cunha, Ignacio Palacios. They all have a good following of their own. So when they came together as a group of 5 and they published or self-published this book, one of the biggest contributing factors to the success of the campaign was that they already had big social media following, each of them as individuals. And I asked them what they felt was the biggest factor in their success, and they said it was when they would post on their own, their individual Facebook pages, and they would inspire a lot of sales that way, or pledges. So there are the different elements you need to include in your campaign. My big tip is make them fall in love with you and the passion that you have for your project. I find that one of the things that isn't done enough when people self-publish a book or even publish a book is to get out there and get yourself seen and tell the story about why you loved it, because they will fall in love with that. They also need to trust you. So Possible always suggests that when you start your campaign, which usually the average turnaround is 30 days on a campaign, or the time frame, go to your friends and family first to get them to come on board and contribute funds, because people follow the leader. They want to feel some sense of trust. So to build trust, to tell them who you are and what you do. Tell them what you're going to do with the money you're asking them for. Be very specific. Tell them about the book specs. Add video and images, because that says so much that text can't. And yeah, the rewards. The rewards are what you are asking them to fund and what you're going to give them in return. Now, I've seen campaigns that have, 20 rewards on there, down to Vegemite jars and things like that. Keep it simple. Focus on the book and everything related to the book. This is my suggestion. Give a broad range of values, because some people can't afford, a lot of money, but they want to support your project. But there's some examples for you. Have some fun too, show your personality. The reason I put this image on the right, the PZPG Photobook and Launch, is because Cameron Cope, who's pictured there, had the funniest crowdfunding campaign I've seen to date. And he included, rewards, as you can see there, like high fives and a drink at the bar with him. But he also had the jumper that he's wearing there and some different things. But keep it focused on the book. The book is the main reward, but you might do an edition that is signed, so that, or with a print in it, so that you can raise a bit more money. Okay, I think I skipped a page. No, I didn't. Okay, now to the design section. As I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but the basic premise, and I've kind of stolen this quote from a few different people, but the sum should equal more than the individual parts, and the sequence should make the readers want to keep turning the page. And to show you what I mean by that, I'm going to show you 2 images from Louise Hawson, who I mentioned before, 52 Suburbs. I think you'd agree with me that these images on their own would be interesting, but they're a much stronger and more powerful and a political, cultural, that there's so much more to them when they've been combined together. And this is just, Louise's whole project and blog was based on, a lot of it was about colour and visual reference and contrast or similarity. And I just think these images wouldn't have meant much on their own, but when you combine them, I mean, it's much more amusing for starters. But be wary of and thoughtful about how you pair and sequence the images. So much more to be said on that, but I do have a blog page on how to design a photo book, and it's very extensive, so I'm going to send that to you in an email afterwards. And for those who are asking about fonts and sizes, it refers to that as well. What I will say is that, yes, adding text to a book is one of the, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's where people make mistakes. With text, make sure you do choose a font that is complementary to the images. Use a lot of white space. You can't have enough white space in a book. And my hot tip is work with the designers and experts in design. You're expert in photography, but you're not expert in design across a page and a series of pages. So don't hesitate to collaborate, even if it's a friend who understands design, but better that they are designers of publications, not websites and logos and the like. But yes, always ask for assistance. There are some great places to go for that. The ACP, Australian Centre for Photography, run online and hopefully again physical workshops on these topics run by various people, but Martin Mishkelnig and Rachel Netfer, and Rob will refer to Rachel later on, do some great work. There's some great video workshops just like this, recorded webinars through Self-Publish Be Happy, which is a UK-based photo book publisher and educator. They've just come out in the last few weeks and I think they're excellent. I'll include those links in my email as well. Who else do I suggest? Yes, my blog post. And just to see some winning designs, you can head to the Australia and New Zealand Photobook Award website and see what the designs of those books are like. To make it look professional, include these kinds of elements. Your foreword, and please don't spell it with an ARD. I've seen that in so many books, even on a cover page on a published book the other day. Spell it correctly. Colophon, the colophon is the page that has all the publishing details, the date it was published, who the publisher was, where it was published, printed, copyright owner, designer, those kinds of details. It makes your book look professional. Include a biography so people know who you are. You can see this one here is by the Light Collective again, and we have a profile on Paul. He also brought in the Light Collective produced their book Black and Blue, which I'd like to point out is about the environment and how the barrier reef was affected by the coal mines up there. They had a very clear purpose and they brought on board people who were well known, such as Tim Winton. Here there's a comment by Tim Winton, and their foreword was done, not the foreword, they had another part in the book that was by Peter Garrett. So if you have a book that you think has legs, has a big audience, bring the right people into the project and get them to write something to give you more credibility. Testimonials, in a way that's a testimonial, and the logo they created, they made sure they put their logo on the back, and they also had an ISBN, which I'll come to later on as well. But these are some design elements that will make your book look professional. Here's a variety of photo book designers that I know of and have seen work by these guys, and they do great work, and I know they are interested in working with people such as yourselves. Some people have different areas of interest. Heidi Romano, for instance, is a German-born photo book designer. She's much more interested in, the fine art conceptual end and contemporary photo book design. Kathy Eastway, who is, for the record, Peter Eastway's wife, she has been a professional photo book designer for decades, and she has worked with a lot of trade publishers in Australia. So she has very much a classic style with her designs as well. I won't go into a lot more detail, but Toon van der Heijden is based in Amsterdam, and he's like the guru on contemporary photo book design if you want to find out more about him. And I refer to him in my blog post that I'll send you later on. Okay, now, while we're talking about design isn't just what's on the inside of the book, it's also what's on the outside of the book, goes through to every level. And I just wanted to get a feel for you guys as to what the basic specs were for books these days are. There's nothing, this is purely just for you to ponder. There's no rules. As I said, you need to define the purpose of your book, and the purpose of that book should define what the format of your book is like. But these are the stats that I have drawn from a series of published titles. How many did I get? I had I looked at 167 Australian and New Zealand published titles, then 430 award titles, and 32 of our Momento Pro people. So this is a pretty good example, or it's drawn from a pretty good sample base. Okay, considerations for choosing the format of your book. Very important to consider that we're down in the antipodes, or we're in the, you know, far away from everybody else in the world. So if you are planning on self-publishing a book that has legs for an international audience, be considerate of the size of your book. It's very expensive to ship from Australia and New Zealand. So if you plan to ship internationally, keep it smaller in size, lighter in weight. So maybe not a hard cover. You can look at soft covers. We do perfect bound and saddle stitched. Try and make it so that it fits into a standard postage pack. People often don't consider the expense of the packaging as well. So smaller and lighter weight for international distribution, but that doesn't mean you can't do and shouldn't do hardcover books of bigger sizes. And in a lot of cases, people are now doing multiple editions. So, oh, I've gone out here. Oh, here we go. So, whoops. I didn't put the correct slide in here, but imagine you're looking at a Bill Henson book in 3 different styles. So the National Gallery of Victoria, when they did produce Bill Henson's book last year, had done 3 versions, a standard edition, a limited edition, and a collector edition. And each of them had slightly different features. And as you can see over here, here's the limited edition version that had all the bells and whistles. It came with a box. It had a print in the front. It was largest in size. It had the highest production values, as you can see there. That's a $2,000 RRP for that. But you can consider doing a standard edition and a limited edition if you want to charge a higher price, and you know, you're not shipping internationally necessarily for these. You can, but you'll just pay for it. Okay, next one is printing and quantity. So this is where Momento Pro comes into it. But I liked this quote from Michael Mack. I was very delighted when he said, this is the hardest part of the process. It's not about the printing equipment. It's about the people who operate it. It's important to have a dialogue with them. And that's why I haven't printed in China. So Michael Mack is one of the leading independent photo book, art book publishers in the world right now. And he came to Australia last year, which is where I heard him make that statement. And that's why, you know, the nice thing about this is that we focus totally on Australia and New Zealand creators, and we genuinely care about your projects and what you're doing. And Lise will talk about this very shortly. I'll bring her in shortly to answer a few questions for us. But just while I'm telling you a few more factors, there's a range of the prices that you can pay with us. I like to say to people, you can pay $5 for a book with us, or you can pay $5,000 for a book with us, depending on the quantity you choose, the size, the number of pages, the print quality. If you come to us with you might come to us with a project idea, and you might say, I want to sell my book for X dollars, X RRP. And then we will work with you. We'll work backwards to figure out what kind of book we can produce for you so that you can charge that amount. But Lise will tell us a little more about that in just a moment. As you can see, we have a different range of book formats there. So we do hardcover and softcover books. I'm going to assume, no, I won't assume, I'll tell you. So I've got hardcover and softcover books here. Just for the record, we can produce you a single hardcover book up to 250 copies or more if needed. With our softcover books, we make those available for orders of 25 copies or more. And the good news is that that minimum quantity will be coming down soon. We've got some new equipment that we received only last week, and we hope to make that a little bit lower. But our softcover books, we also produce in different formats. So you'll see here, this is what we call perfect bound binding, which is your standard softcover book that you would see, glue bound, perfect bound here. And then this, I'll probably show you a better one later. Saddle stitched, believe it or not, saddle stitching is bound with a staple, which always amuses me. But we make our saddle stitch books look extra smart by making this spine, we call it a box spine, by sharpening up the spine so it's squared off, so it still has a standard book look and feel. We still use all the beautiful paper materials, the papers, sorry, and they still look very professional. They're very popular if you want to self-publish or create catalogs and the like. Now, one thing that's really important when we're talking to you about a hardcover order is the type of binding you like. And I just thought it would be a good opportunity for me to confirm what these different binding styles are. Sidestone. So as you can see, it has a curve in the spine because basically we take that book block, we stitch down the side, and then that's what creates the curve in the paper, in the gutter. And the alternative and more popular option for self-published books, because the side zone is very common for print-on-demand photo books for consumers all around the world. Most books that you will find in a retail store or a retail environment are section sewn, and that's where the pages are printed and folded into sections, as you can see here, and then they're stitched together, and that allows for them to lay flat when the book is open, or flatter. So that's just something to be aware of. And on our website, you can find, we have in our products menu, you'll find our softcover books, and we have, as I said, the saddle stitch booklets, and then we have soft covers, but there is a calculator already available online for you to be able to price them up and order easily. With the hardcover books, it's better for you to get in contact with Lisa, which is taking me to this form, which is our custom quote form. And that is what Lisa will use when she starts a conversation with you about a volume order run. It's helpful for us to know these kinds of details before we start, and then she can put together a quote. But I think at this point, it is most appropriate that I bring Lisa on board. So let me just bring her into the conversation. Find you in the list here, Lise. Oh, panelists, here we are. So now I'm going to turn on your video, Lise, and start video. And while I'm just getting that to work, there she is. So
can you hear me?
If you don't know, Lise has been working with us for over 10 years now, and she is the queen of our quoting and custom and volume orders. And I just thought it would be nice, first of all, for you to see her face, and then for Lise just to give a very brief outline of what's the best way for people to approach you, or what's the experience somebody goes through when they want to start a volume order and they get in contact with you.
Yeah, look, generally, I mean, most people fill out that form that you just pointed out on our website. I mean, the other way is my email address is there on that page. So you can always email me if you're finding that you've got a little bit more that you want to tell me about the project, because obviously, you know, the more I know, the better. There's a little part down the bottom where you can put some extra comments in that form. So, you know, either way, your telephone number's on there as well, and I'll just give you a call if I feel I need to talk to you more before giving you a quote. Otherwise, my phone number's there as well. You can always call me. But those three ways are generally the best way to get in contact with me.
And Lise, do you prefer people to just do some research up front, like with our product pages, so they can be familiar with the different paper types and sizes and the like?
Yeah, I mean, it is good to have a look at that if you've never used us before, you know, to have a bit of an idea at least of the kind of size that you want to do and stuff. I mean, the more you know before you speak to me, the quicker you can get a quote, and the quicker we can get to something, a product that, you know, I can quote on. So yeah, that's always a good thing to do.
Okay, and I think it's handy to tell people a little bit about how our production schedule works with volume orders.
Yeah, so we have, I mean, Memento's got sort of three arms. We've got a Momento Pro's got a print-on-demand service where we're doing, you know, albums for professional photographers, wedding albums and stuff like that. Then we've got the general public side, Momento, so we're doing, you know, mums and dads books and, you know, kids books and stuff like that. And then we've got the volume service as well. So that's all going through the one production facility. So it's important with volume orders, and that's part of my job as well, to kind of schedule your print run in amongst all the other stuff we've got to do. So that's something that we talk about as well, when you might be wanting your print run and what we can work with there. So yeah, the sooner you contact, the better, because then we can sort of plan when you might need the books and how long it will take. Because depending on what you're doing, you know, some products take longer than others, and it depends on the time of year as well. So scheduling.
Generally block out that busy period.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, sometimes when we get really busy, you know, there's only a certain amount of volume orders that we can fit in amongst all the other printing that we're doing. So, yeah.
And Lise, what's the biggest amount of books we've produced for a customer?
Well, look, the max run is sort of 250 that we do. We sort of specialize in 25 to 250 copies. And we kind of, that'd be our maximum that we would do in one run, for sure. I mean, obviously people might get repeat runs or, you know, do that sort of thing, but 250 would be the maximum.
Yep. And look, the reason we have chosen 250 is, over the years, from the research that I've been showing you earlier, even trade publishers don't, some trade publishers and indie publishers don't do huge runs. But we discovered that what the market can bear and what seems most appropriate in Australia and New Zealand is is up to 250 copies. So that's what's driven that limit on the 250 run. And Lise, can you just mention a little bit about proof copies when we provide those? Because I know a lot of people ask, will they get to see the print before the book run's done?
Yeah, like what we do as part of the volume service, and it's always a good idea to do this, and this is where, you know, to give yourself plenty of time as well, we do a proof copy that's included, and all that gets outlined in the quote that I send to customers. But yeah, proof copy beforehand, and it's fully bound. So basically it's a copy, like an artist proof of what you'll get in your run. And at the same time, we do a copy for ourselves, and we're using that as a match as well. So and we like to do that as close to the print run as possible. But yes, that's included in the quote that I give you. So we just get you to pay for that up front, the volume unit price, and then that gets deducted off the main run when we set that to go. But yeah, it's one of those things where I will take care of all that stuff for you. So you just have to do the hard part of designing it and getting it all together. But I will set your orders for you and manage them through production, you know, as per the schedule and stuff. So I'm here to do all that for you, so you don't have to worry about that.
Thank you, Lise. And I've just had a chance while you've been talking to have a quick look at the questions that have come up. There's quite a few. I'll come back to those. Somebody was asking about, could you support non-Adobe desktop DTP users, and a few questions related to spine widths and things like that. They are exactly the kinds of details that Lise can help you with. And we do have a page on the website that confirms the different design tools and all the related specifications and color management details and ICC profiles. So we won't go into detail about those now, but I will include links to that information in the email after this event, so that we can get you started. But Lise is definitely the person who can answer those questions.
Yeah, I answered Shane on that one too, Lib, a bit further down. I just jotted something down there for Shane. Yep, because that was what he was asking. So
thanks. And Lise, do you think from scanning that chat window, is there anything else now that would be relevant to mention?
Can we supply an InDesign file? Yes, we've got an InDesign plugin, which, you know, Lib just touched on that in terms of, we've got on our webpage now design tools, and that has our InDesign plugin, like the download to that. So yes, you can supply an InDesign file, like, well, you export it obviously with our settings, but yes, you can work in InDesign.
So we accept the PD. The big thing is that you can use InDesign, but we accept the PDF file. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Lisa. I'm going to move on, but I just wanted people to see your face, and Lisa will take very good care of you. as I'm sure Rob will comment on later at the end too. Okay, so back to, at least I'm going to turn your video off now and mute you. One moment. All right, so now the other side of the dollars equation. Just let me check. Yes, quote form to pricing. So pricing is obviously a big question for everyone. How do you price your book? I'm not here to tell you exactly how to price your book. What I want to do is give you some examples of what other people are doing and things you might need to consider. But I totally agree with Michael Mack's comment, which he made only last year when he came to Sydney. And it is something that I see too, that the trend is that an increase in RRP has been acceptable. That's great if it's sustainable. Now, let me show you some pricing here that I took from my survey. So as I mentioned, in total here, I've probably surveyed about 550 or so books across trade published editions, entries that were entered into the awards over the last few years, and books that we have produced for people that they have then on-sold. And as you can see, you know, the RRP ranges, well, this is average 52 up to 90. My analysis of the variation here is that the published titles from your mainstream publishers, who generally print larger editions, they print overseas, so it's cheaper production. They would generally use lower production values, and I don't mean cheap and nasty here, I just mean more affordable production values. They have a larger audience to market and sell to. And on the RRP front, retailers, your traditional high street bookstore, definitely has a lower expectation, or expects a lower RRP. Many times when I've spoken to booksellers, they say, yep, you've got to keep your photo book between $30 and $50. Now, that might be true in the case if you're just targeting the retailers. With the ANZPA, Australia New Zealand Photobook Award column there, you'll see that the average RRP was $74. And the reason I think that we ended up with a higher RRP from those people surveying is because this was, you know, this is your more independent art book published, photo book lovers. The works are produced by independent publishers who do smaller runs, some overseas and some international. You might be interested to know that, I got it here, that just want to tell you what the quantity that people produce are. No, okay, so I'm going to have to go off the top of my head. So my understanding is that, say, Michael Mack and Mack Books in the UK, the average edition size, they can print anywhere from 1,000 up to 5,000 books because they have a bigger market that they can sell to. In Australia, 1,000 would be a big run for a publisher here, an indie publisher, if they're doing a photo book. Printing wise, if you're going to print overseas or do a traditional offset print run, your minimum quantity that they'll do is about 600. So that's just something to bear in mind if you're thinking, you know, a lot of photo book self-publishers I've heard about have garages or full of books from printing thousands. So just be wary that you might get a cheaper price per unit if you're printing thousands, but you will find it harder to sell them. That's once again why we choose 25 to 250. And lastly, with the Momento Pro RRP, $90, that came from approximately, I think, 32 respondents, that average. That's because they're generally sold in an environment where the buyer knows the creator or has communicated with them digitally or physically, you know, one-to-one. And they are appreciative of the fact that it's locally made, that it's made with higher production values, and yes, it's all about the network. So I just thought that that was a nice way to give you a bit of an overview on what you can use to help figure out how to price your book. Most photobook creators are happy to cover their costs. Most photobook creators are not into the photobook publishing process for profit, but there are a lot of other advantages that come from that. As you can see, the price range is quite varied, with the lowest RRP at $10 in each case, and all the way up to almost $6,000, and I'll reveal who can charge that very shortly. Okay. Yes, so here is an example. This book we produced for Stephen DuPont. If you don't know him, I believe he's Australia's most prolific photobook creator. He's tried all different kinds of photobook publishing models, working with a trade publisher locally, indie publisher internationally. His work has been included in photobook like collections, photobooks that are a collective of people's work. He's hand printed, hand bound, the whole works. But it's interesting that over the years, in the last few years, he's decided to focus on a very small run of say 1 to 5, very high production values. As you can see, he's charging $4,000. That's because it's a rare product. He also prints with inkjet. He uses inkjet printing. This actually has a metal cover. It's quite unique. But his theory was that he can produce smaller runs and sell them at higher prices with a bigger margin to collectors like libraries and people in the collectors network. He can sell those more easily because he now has built up a profile, and then he can make money to fund his next project. Now this one, there's your Bill Henson. As we saw before, that one sold for $2,000 a pop. And I'm not saying these are not common, but they are out there, but they're very much in the collector's realm. And this one, you know, I just put it in there for aspirational value. Ken Duncan's book, which we produce, I'm glad to say we produce. Look, I feel that he's one of the only photographers in the country or in Australia and New Zealand who could charge such prices. But the key to Ken's ability to sell this is that he has been devoted to the people who have bought his work since the 80s, and he communicates with them regularly. When he produces a new publication, generally they want to buy it. So the reason I like to include this is, yes, you're not going to be able to do this overnight. You may never be able to do it, but it can be done. And a lot about it is, a lot of the success or the ability to do this is cultivating your network and your email list, which we'll come to very shortly. Distribution. Any photo book publisher in Australia, self-publisher, will tell you that the biggest issue is distribution. But I'm very pleased to say that I came across some positive news, and I found a potential solution that can work for you. My theory is that as a self-publisher, the best way to distribute your work is to your friends and the people, say, who crowdfund your book or who you get your pre-orders from, the people who are the subjects of the book. But there are also distribution services that can help, including Books at Manic, which is, I think, has been running for about 30 years, very well established. As they say, Australia's leading independent distributor of books on contemporary culture, architecture, art. And that's why I'm showing them here, because they're very specific and interested in photo books. There's some familiar names here, some well-known artists, but you know, they take on board big runs and small runs. You guys could contact them as well. Generally speaking, a distributor will take between a 70 and 80% cut, which is then shared with the retailer. Now, this was my big find in preparation for the workshop. Woods Lane is, let me just bring up my information here. Woods Lane is the biggest book distributor in Australia. They've been running for 30 years. They're the oldest and the largest. They distribute books through Australia and New Zealand for local and international publishers, for anyone basically, as we'll discuss in a moment. They distribute to people like, who have we got here? People who stock their books are Dimmicks, Burklow, Unicoop, Big W, Kmart, Myers, Booktopia, Amazon, and they also distribute to academic and educational retailers, to museums, to galleries, to airport stores. And I think these are all, you know, there's a very broad scope, and these are people who are interested in photo books. So I spent a bit of time looking through the Woods Lane website to see just how many photography books they did have on their books, and they had a great number. And you'll see some familiar names. I believe that Paul Llewellyn might even be online now. Paul is part of the Light Collective. We looked at their book only moments ago in the presentation, Black and Blue. They had previously published another title, which is here. Ignacio Palacios, many of you may have heard of. He's quite a prolific photo book creator as well. So he stocks his books with these guys. Ken Duncan. I actually rang and spoke to the woman who is the representative who you would speak to if you wanted to approach them. And she mentioned that Ken's books are the biggest selling photo books in their catalogue. But I thought I'd just give you a very quick overview of how it works with them. Oh, yes, actually I've got it here. So this is, just to let you know, this is the next book they're about to release in October. And I believe that this person would be very similar to many of you out there, who is a photo enthusiast who's really into their work and has done a lot of travel photography. They will take on board work by the general public, but this is the kind of process that you have to go through. You have to submit it for assessment. So you can approach them. There's no guarantee they'll take it, but you submit it for assessment by their sales and marketing team. If they're happy, they'll send you a contract. Then you have to do the hard work on submitting a publicity and marketing plan, because that has a major impact on how they will advertise it and get it into the stores. So they advertise to the stores, but it's your job to advertise to the end purchaser to encourage them to go into a store. And just so you know, you get, once a purchase order comes through, you get 3 to 4 weeks to supply a book. The dollars on the dollar front, $350 to get you set up. You pay for the shipping to the publisher, and then the $30 per book per annum for a title page listing. Title page, apparently, and I've learned this just this week, is this repository that lists all photo books in Australia. So they list your work in there. There's a storage fee, but the big clincher here is the 70% commission. Okay, so they will take 70% of the RRP. That is probably a showstopper for most people, but the reason I like to inform you about this distribution option is that some people don't always have dollars as the end result of their book. If you want to get broad access to your book, then a distributor can help you with that. So there's a lot of food for thought there. Here's a series of bookstores in Australia and overseas that would be interested in purchasing photo books. I know specifically that Kuna Kuna in Sydney is very happy to speak to self-publishers, but you'd probably go through a similar process to what I just outlined for Woods Lane, and they'll generally take about a 40% cut. So in that scenario where Woods Lane takes a 70% cut, they share a percentage of that with the retailer as well. Online, series of bookstores, 2 New Zealand ones here worth noting, Remote Photo Books and the Essence Archive for the Kiwis on board. The most interesting find for me was this last one here called The Fuchs, and that's a shorthand for photo books. And that's based out of Cyprus. And I just wanted to show you the model that they have. It's a very new entity. I've forgotten the man's name. I think his name's Max. And yeah, basically, as he says, a new home for indie published photo books and zines from around the world. And it was very comforting and good to see when I went there that the first page that I came to had a series of Australian books there. And these guys, Nature Boy, Cabramatta, and I think Waiting Under Southern Skies, they're all published by T&G Publishing, who I mentioned earlier. but many of the others are direct from self-publishers. So the way he likes to work, he calls this an online photo book library and marketplace. It's specific for small self and indie publishers. He targets photo book lovers and collectors. He's very much into, you know, getting a good level of communication with collectors in the photo book community. He lists your book, or Foots list your book for free. They promote it via their website, social media, and newsletters. They take the orders, but you send the book. So you have to have physical books ready. You can't just submit a digital or a PDF file to him. You have to have the physical books ready to send. They remit the funds to you, ex commission and shipping. And the commission that he takes is 25% for books that are under $15, or 15% for books that are under $15. So that's a much nicer, or a lower commission to be sharing with someone. I think that's worth a look. Here's a few outside the box options. Your own, I mean, if you can do it, you can have your own art gallery set up, or photo gallery, which is what Christian Fletcher, whose picture is here with his book West, he distributes or sells a lot of his books in his gallery. If you don't have your own gallery, work with a gallery that you know, or who you know is appreciative of photo books, and get to know them, and they will naturally then want to promote your books. Why not tourism centres? Your local coffee shop. Local is really good. If you have a book that is about your local community, or a topic that is of relevance to people in the near vicinity, use it. It's really a positive element to utilise. So approach local coffee shops, local gift stores, even local hotel chains. One example I always remember is Ignacio Palacios did a book on the Kimberley. Was it the Kimberley? No, Carragini. And he got a pre-order, in the sense that he worked with I think it was the Carragini Hotel. And, they bought, hundreds or 1,000 copies of this book and they funded it. I think that's a fabulous idea. You have to do your homework and do a bit of work, but, you can be creative and find these ways to get your book funded and get it out there. And concept stores. Okay, so I know from my, wanderings in Sydney that there's two high-end fashion, or not high-end, two interesting fashion stores. One's called Maple and one's called Inku, and they have, they very much work with creative fashion designers. And they also have a segment in their store that's got like Polaroid cameras and, photo related memorabilia. And they also have photo books in there. So if you go and, Simon Bernhardt, who I was referring to before with his controversial books, he went in and physically walked the walk and went in to see about 20 photo book retailers in Sydney and Melbourne, got to know them, took his books in, sold them books, and they sold the books for him. So you've got to do the legwork sometimes, literally. Another great place to sell your books, is at photo book festivals and fairs. There are so many photo book festivals and fairs around the world these days that you could almost do a weekly or monthly jaunt. That would be my dream. Until then, though, I satisfy myself by going to the Melbourne Art Book Fair. It's one of the biggest events of the year for the photo book world, the photo book community. They come together, they have a trade show with talks and discussions at the same time. It's worth a visit. You'll be inspired. If you get a table, it's very cost effective. I think maybe only $100 or $200 for a table. But the benefit of going to something like the Melbourne Art Book Fair is not just the sales of the books, but meeting the people in the community as well. Photo is a new festival that's happening in Melbourne that was going to happen in May. Very disappointed. They were having a whole photo book weekend. It's now been postponed till next year, but they are having a photo book fair as well, and discussions and photo book reviews. So it's definitely one to look at. Photobook New Zealand, the biggest in New Zealand. Basically, these events bring people together. And when you can speak to the purchaser or potential purchaser face to face, it makes the biggest difference. So I'm not going to go into much more detail about that, but these are the kind of places you can sell. If you don't have a big profile or a big distribution network, get to the events where you can sell, and you also don't have to pay for packaging and shipping if you can hand over the book yourself. How am I going for time here? 11:46. Oh, that's all good. Okay. This is one of my favorite quotes though. Just remember that if you want people to end up ultimately buying your books, you have to buy their books too. It's a karmic thing. So head along to these fairs and festivals, even if you're not selling there, go along to support your community. Because in a lot of cases, people who buy your books are going to be photo book creators themselves. Promotion makes all the difference. And I'm going to show you some great examples and very current examples of these things. So if my aim is to bring Rob Annesley in for a chat at about 12 o'clock. So we're 1:45, so we're tracking well. But prior to bringing Rob in, I'm going to show you some of the promotions that he did for the book that he just launched in the last 2 weeks. So an obvious one is your website. Get the book on the website, make it look professional, be clear about what the different characteristics and features of the book are. You know, when people list, or when publishers list or distributors or retailers list the details of their book, obviously you have to have the title, the number of pages, even the weight is important for a lot of people, the type of paper, the print style, and of course the dollars. But make sure it looks appealing and professional, and very clever of Rob here to include the ability for you to enter an email address here, because as I mentioned, I think one of the biggest keys to success for a self-publisher is to know who your community is and to get your community's email details. A lot of you might have a big following on social media, but I think it's important to convert those social media followers to your email list subscribers as well, because while social media is great, there is far more traction and response that you will get from sending an email than from just posting on social media. Rob will tell us a little bit more later about how he came to produce these pages. But once again, you know, the consistency in the design here, it's all very clear and consistent and concise. So yeah, bear that in mind, and the imagery has to blend in with your book as well. Social media, more content here from Rob. As you can see, he's kept the design consistent all the way through. This from the book cover image is repeated here, but he's just kept it nice and clear and concise. Also worth noting that Rob got his gallery where he was hosting the event to post on his behalf too. Get everybody involved that you can. They say that people need, you know, multiple touch points, or to hear about a product, or in this case, a photo book from multiple channels and multiple times. So get everybody involved that you can. Get your foot soldiers involved. This one you may not know about, but Photobook jousting is a hashtag that I discovered that is used by true photo book aficionados and creators as a way of drawing you to good quality photo book content that's out there. I stumbled across it, but yes, that's the title, the hashtag that I would use when you're launching a book to get some notice on social media and people who follow hashtags. Videos. There's no better way. I mean, if you can't physically be there, if your potential purchaser can't be looking at the book, touching it, feeling it, then a video is the next best thing. And you can literally do a flick through, as you can see here. If you would like to see this video, play and many like it. On the Australia and New Zealand Photobook Award page, we have all of them. And the trick here is just, there's not much to it. Make sure the light's right. Keep it, you know, aligned symmetrically. Don't go too fast. You don't have to show every page. You can just give them a teaser. But yeah, this is definitely a great option for you to post on your website, to share on social media. So adding some music in makes all the difference as well. I think that's enough to give you a feel for what you're after. But there are other kinds of videos you can do as well. As you can see, this is a very recent post by Amir, who I believe might be online today too. And he produced not necessarily a flick through, but it was just a beautiful promotional video for his. Okay, there we are. So, newsletters. As I mentioned, one of the big keys to success when you're self-publishing a book is to build up your email database. That helps also if you want to crowdfund a book, because they're the people I call them your foot soldiers that you want to communicate with, who already know you and love your work, and then they will spread the word. Word of mouth and personal referrals is a very big part of spreading the news about your book. But when you do send people newsletters, give them something more than just talking about yourself and your book. I liked this one recently that came through from Ignacio, who I've mentioned a few times, and he was talking to people about why he had a love for photo books and talked about the kinds of photo books that he has on his bookshelf. So when you're communicating with them, give them something meaningful to digest. And if you don't have an email database, which I'm going to imagine a lot of you don't, if you don't worry, you can build it up, but you can go and maybe dig up some names and emails from the past, people who've bought your prints, or you know, have come to it. If you've ever hosted an exhibition before, just go through your personal and professional network to start with, and then maybe invite them to join your email list permanently. I think you need to give them the option, but yeah, you pull out a few that you might have in the archives, and that's a good way to start. And then, as I said, just try to encourage to convert people from your social media feeds to join your email list. Do presentations and webinars, Camera Club, you know, spots. That's the kind of place, or they're the kinds of places you can build up an email list. Book launch. Okay, to me, this is another massive factor for success when self-publishing a photo book. And a lot of people produce a photo book to complement an exhibition, but I think you can create an exhibition to complement the launch of a photo book. And I also don't think these days you need to have an extended exhibition. Let's face it, if money is short, if you're short on the budget front, I suggest hold a one night only book launch / exhibition and bring people together, make it an experience. We've got a few examples here. This one here is Craig Wetchen, who I've mentioned a few times, who produced a book called Men in Their Sheds. And I'm just seeing if I have details of that. Yeah, so Craig produced Men in Their Sheds with Echo Publishing, who I also mentioned before. He said that the book launch was the biggest highlight of his career. They had 600 people there on the night, and you can see quite a few of them here. He sold 500 books on that one night. And that was from a 15,000 book run. That's a pretty spectacular effort. Craig is like one of the great examples I like to talk about when it comes to photo books. Yes, he did work with a small publisher, but he did a great job himself. A few things to mention: he hosted the event in a place that was very appropriate for the book itself. So, you know, talking about men in their sheds, the book included portraits of men in their sheds. But then he brought all of the subjects together in an environment where a lot of, you know, one of the subjects in his book did up cars. So they brought the cars in. I have a video. He had a group of motorcyclists come in on the bikes and fill the space as well. And they were subjects in the book too. But, you know, the purpose of his book followed through all the way through to the launch and the elements that he brought together in the launch. Another person who did that beautifully was, I know this is an odd photo, but this is from the launch of a book by Ingvar Kenny. He created a book called, the book was called The Ball, and he had gone and documented the crazy happenings that happen, or all the things that happen at BNS balls. And when he launched the book, he followed through with bringing into the, you know, even the drink selection mirrored what he'd kind of been documenting at the ball. He had, you know, they usually held in tents, so he had a kind of a tent, a canvas across the ceiling in one of the rooms. It just all played into it. Here is the launch of one of Simon Bernhardt's book, Gateway, as you will see by the image in the background here. Simon made the book the focus of the gallery as much as the prints. So keep your books in a central location. So many people put them in the back corner, but if you want them to be sold, keep them in the fore. The interesting thing is, as you can see, he's got his prints on the wall. Often people can't afford a $1,000 print, but they can afford a, you know, I think in this case, $125 book. And that's why it's also nice to sell the books in an exhibition environment. Also do a book signing and an artist talk, which Rob will mention for us a little bit later on. A few more tips on that front: have somebody ready or a number of people available to man the book stand and take the sales, get one of the Wi-Fi, you know, payment processing systems, and have a number of books open ready for viewing, but also have a stack ready to go so that people can pop them in their bag. And as I said, an event is the best place to sell your photo books. You've got excitement. When people have a drink in their hand, they're more likely to part with their money. When they're comparing $1,000 print with a $125 or less book, you know, it's a much easier sell. But the thing is, and I failed to mention that, is that you need to get up and talk about the book and why you made the book, what inspired you. And it's about the story in the book, but get them as excited about it as you, and I promise you they'll buy. I had an experience myself in New Zealand where I knew about a fabulous book called The Gold Coast, created by Ying Ang. I'd seen it many times. I knew it had won awards, but I hadn't felt compelled to buy the book. I heard her speak about the book and what drove her to produce it, and me and many others left that theatre where she was speaking and went out and bought the books, and she sold out in minutes. So it is key, you telling the story. Another thing, to get your profile, to raise your profile and in a way promote your book before it's launched, you can participate in things like photo book reviews. They're not held very often in Australia, but they are, and there will be one happening at Photo Melbourne Festival next year. This is one we hosted a few years ago, where we bring together, you have to submit an application and we'll bring together photo book creators with a project, photo book project in the early stages of, you know, different stages of development, and we'll team you up with experts in publishing, design, editing, marketing, those kinds of things. So keep your eye on if we ever do host one of those again, or I hear about them, I will always promote them on our Momento Pro and the Australia New Zealand Photobook Award social feeds, and sometimes in a newsletter. So keep your eye on those things. Media releases, very important. there's not a lot of publishers in Australia who are going to be interested in writing about photo books, but you know, and they're always looking for stories. So you'd be mad not to send a media release out to them. Here's a few, both local and international, who are specifically interested in photo books. Here, another thing, enter the Photobook Awards. I mentioned Sarah Walker before, who ended up winning 2 Photobook Awards, and it has helped her career thrive. It's helped with the publicity of her books. Here's a whole heap of them that you can enter. I'll include these in the link. I'll include a link to the list of these in the email that I send you, so don't worry if you can't write them all down. This is another new kind of, I've obviously always knew about ISBNs, but I was interested to discover that a lot of our 30%, I think it was, of our 37% of the entries to the awards over the last few years have had ISBN numbers, which surprised me. I didn't think it would be that much for self-publishers, but it is really important for you to, if you want to get your book seen and noticed by everybody in the photo book ecosystem, the retailers, the distributors and the sellers, get an ISBN. It's not expensive. I think I have here, yep, it's about, as I said, yeah, 1 barcode and 1 ISBN is $89, but it's totally worth it. And you get those in Australia from Thorpe Bowker. I'll include that link as well. Okay, I just wanted to mention now our most successful photo book, which is by the lovely Jana Brunklikova, pictured here with Lisa. This is how closely we work with our customers. This is Jana coming in to pick up possibly 250 of her recipe books. So she did a recipe book called Intuitive Eating. Now, I think she had so many success. The characteristics that made her book so successful are that she was a naturopath and a vegan chef, and that is what her book is all about. She already had a well-established community of customers who would come and see her for her naturopathy. They inspired her to make the book happen. When she went to produce the book, she worked very closely with Lisa on the materials that she chose. In keeping with her, organic, natural way of life, she chose a raw board cover. She chose Eco Star paper, I think it was, that is very environmentally friendly. Hers was a very custom design. She got a friend who she knew very well to do the design. He was a publication designer, which was very lucky for her. She had some inserts. She made this book a beautiful object as well as being, a beautiful resource. And it was that as well. It was a resource for people too. So she had a really well-defined audience. She had a niche genre. She had a well-established email network and social following already. She took a lot of time to plan it. She made all of her communications and the design very personalized and meaningful, and all the promotions for it. And the format and the design of her book reflected her philosophy and the purpose for the book. And I believe that she now has produced with us and sold over 750 copies, which was astounding. And she's now doing a limited edition. And yeah, she just approached us one day after a friend inspired her to go ahead and do that book she always wanted to do. So I thought you guys might like to hear that story. But now I would like to bring in Rob Annesley, who I've already mentioned. The beauty of bringing Rob in is that I can tell you, all these great stories and ideas and figures and everything from my perspective, but I want Rob to tell you from the perspective of a self-publisher himself. So Rob, let's see how I go here. I'm going to unmute you, ask to unmute, and ask to start video. And hopefully we'll see Rob appear momentarily. Oh, yes. Hi, Rob. Can you just let me know that I can hear you?
Hi, Libby. Hello, everyone.
Hi there. So just let me give one more, just a tiny bit more background on your book, Rob. I mean, Rob, you've been a photographer for years. I know you have, you do professional motorbike photography. Is that right?
Motorsport, yes, cars.
motorsport photography, but your passion was your nature photography.
Yes, got heavily involved in wildlife not too many years ago.
Right. Well, look, why don't I let you just tell the story about how the wild came to be, and just if you could make specific mention of the grant you received and the help you received in putting it together, and the elements that you think or what you did with your launch that made it so successful.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Libby. The project started about 3 years ago, and it actually came about because I have a very, very naughty dog. Now, you might wonder how a dog has got something to do with a photo book, but it actually started because I got some professional advice to how to make my dog's behavior better. And it all started from taking him down to the local park, which is only about 1.5 kilometers from my own home, and exercising him each afternoon. Naturally enough, at a park with a wetland, it was just too good an opportunity to not take a camera down with me and to take some photographs while the dog was having a play around the park. So for the last 3 years, I've been photographing this small wetland, small suburban wetland, and from that, put together quite a large file of images, thousands of images over the course of those 3 years. And I thought, gee, I'd love to do a photo book, as we all do when we take lots of photos. So I've been a member of the Australian Centre for Photography and for the last 8 years, and I've been doing many courses down there to educate myself. And one of the courses I did was called Stories and Projects, a course run by Martin Mishkelnug, who you referred to earlier. And when I did the course, I thought it was going to be a standard photo book course. I was going to learn about paper, and I was going to learn about positioning and text and covers and things. And quite frankly, the course was totally opposite. And I initially thought the course was going to be a waste of time, because what Martin did was he brought in specialists to talk to us about photo books, but also exhibitions, funding. And excuse me while I just look at my notes. He brought in a publisher, and we talked to a publisher about how books are published, the actual nitty-gritty of the information of publishing. He brought a printer in to tell us how print was actually done. The books, the pages were actually manifested through 4-color or 6-color, the types of inks, the type of responses and reactions to ink on paper. He brought in Ingvar Kenner, who you just mentioned.
Oh, right. Okay.
And spoke to us and told us all his harrowing stories as a fledgling photographer and all the difficulties he's been through, and then showed us his couple of books that he's done, and we all felt for him, because we all could appreciate the struggles that as a photographer he went through, and then to now where he's just a wonderful recognized household name in photo books, and a lovely gentleman as well. Another person that Martin brought in to talk to us was a grants and funding specialist, someone who was actually in the business of writing grants, a professional grant writer, to talk about how to actually put the wording together to make your application mean something and jump out of a pile of other grants and funding requests. He brought in a professional grant recipient. So the other side of that coin, he brought in someone who specialized in actually going for grants and funding applications and getting the money from the Australian Arts Council, local councils, and bodies, the benevolent bodies that philanthropically to give money out to art and culture projects. So that was very interesting. So over the course of a 10-week it was called Stories and Projects, and I can highly recommend it. Australian Centre for Photography, have a look at that course. Following on from that, I then did a course with Rachel Nepfer, who's an absolute legend, ex-photo manager for Rolling Stone magazine out of New York, and she's an Australian, and she's here in Sydney, and she's absolutely brilliant. And she dovetailed the Stories and Projects courses that Martin did by then having a course that showed us how to put our photos and our process out on a table and match photos with photos, how to cull, how to arrange, how things went together through texture or orientation or numbers, or just how to put pictures together with other pictures so they made a whole lot of sense. And that was just a revelation to me. That just made it so I just fully understood how a photo book should be. Then from there, it was then a case of, okay, put the book together, get a prototype done. I worked with a couple of your staff, Ryan, who's now left, but Elizabeth, wonderful customer service people who answered all the questions about the software, Momento Pro software, which needed just a little bit of explanation to get started, but your staff is absolutely brilliant. So then I put the book together, made some mistakes along the way, printed a prototype, thought, no, that doesn't look right. I don't like the text. I don't like this, and just made some subtle changes to it. And over a period of a couple of books, got it to where I liked what it looked like. And then I thought, okay, how am I going to make this into something? So at the same time, I wanted to do an exhibition. I had always wanted to. And I thought, I need someone to fund this because the book is going to cost a bit. The exhibition is going to cost a bit. Who's going to fund this? I couldn't do it all myself. So being a local suburban wetlands, I went to my local ward councillor and I asked her, where might I go at council to see if I could get some sort of funding through my local council. Stop me if I need to take a breath or if I'm going too fast, Libby.
Okay, you're all good. One thing I'm going to, while you're talking, Rob, I'm going to take a moment to check the questions that have come in on the feed.
Sure.
But one thing I failed to mention that I'd love you to comment on is the dollars that were involved in your project as well.
Sure. I was just going to cover the funding and then break it down as to how the funding was utilised. So I went to the council, the cultural team at my local Georges River Council. I put my book in front of them. They were encouraged by it. They thought an exhibition would be good. So then I went back home and did some work with my local printer, print printer, not book printer, and got a costing structure for what the prints would all cost to do an exhibition, and then went to Momento Pro and got a cost on with Lisa as to how much that might cost to print 100 copies of the book. Long and the short of it, I got a grant for $11,000, and from there it cost me $5,000 to do the prints and about $6,100 to do the books. So each of my books is 132 pages, 150 GSM art matte paper. It's not lay flat. It's what's that called, Libby?
Sorry?
The book.
Side sewn.
Side sewn. They were $61 per book. I had 100 of those made. So basically I spent, with the art and design work, I used up the money that the council had funded me on both the exhibition and the book. So I got it all done.
And I mean, I just think that's a phenomenal amount of money that you can receive, but a good amount for the production of a book. And yeah, I'd just like to tell everybody that I was watching Rob's book come together, observing. I wasn't involved in any of the conversations, but everything I saw, because I follow pretty closely online anybody who's in Australia and New Zealand creating a photo book, and all the content that you posted on social media. And then I went to your website. I mentioned it before that there was it was very professional and it was incredibly consistent. And I also knew that you were working on the exhibition and the launch, because I could see you posting about that and preparing everybody. The Hurstville Gallery was also, reiterating what you had there. So you could tell that you had buy-in and a relationship with the people that you were working with. But I just remember thinking, wow, this is a beautiful case study in how to put a book together. So I'd just like everybody to know that I didn't know Rob had done all of these courses to help get him to the point where he was, but I was pretty confident that his launch would be a success. So I only spoke to Rob about a week ago, so 2 or 3 days after your launch had actually occurred. And because I wanted to give you guys a good example of something really current that worked as a photo book project. And I love the fact that your content is very local. I think, you know, local oriented works can just work so beautifully. Anyway, you told me much more. You confirmed for me that your launch was a success, that I believe you sold, what, 40 books. You got the biggest crowd that the gallery had ever had. Yeah. You sold the most books or product that they'd ever sold at a launch. But I'm kind of going to speak for you here just to point out a few of the things that I thought really added to the success was, yes, that consistency in the design, all the communication that you made. You even had a setback where, due to COVID, your launch was postponed, right?
Yes, it was supposed to be in May and it was put back until July.
But you kept communicating with everyone. Communication is such a big thing. And then on the night, though, let's talk now specifically about the launch itself. I remember you saying to me that you'd done an artist talk, and I can't remember what were the words. You felt it was just so self-indulgent or something.
Yes. Very self-conscious, and it was kind of a rock star moment. My son said to me, "Dad, you're a rock star." And I was sitting there signing books, and I felt so pretentious.
Pretentious, that was the word that you said.
People coming up and asking me, "Would you please sign the book?" And it was a heartfelt moment when people wanted me to do that, because I'm a shy photographer. I spend my time out in the wild, not with people, but with wildlife, and quietly sitting for hours waiting for a bird or a lizard or something to come along. But it was quite a moment.
And I know you called that moment, well, the signing, pretentious, but to me, that's the thing. People love the rapport or the interaction that they end up having with the creator, and it makes all the difference. I think it would be a waste to have an exhibition or a book launch where you, as the creator, don't get up and speak, even if you hate public speaking.
And I do with a passion. I
think, you know, photographers are behind the camera for a reason, aren't they?
Yeah.
But it makes a big difference. And, you know, if you're passionate about it, it'll be easier to talk about. But so you did the book signing as a specific kind of part of the launch, and you also did the artist talk as part of that launch. But you mentioned there were a few other great little things. So your artist talk, was it it was a very short, like 7-minute prezzo or something?
Yeah, it was 7 or 8 minutes, and I just basically told a little bit of the heritage history of the wetlands and how they came about, and then a talk about how the exhibition and the project came about with my naughty dog. So I gave people that opportunity to understand the location and how the project came about. And I think this is important. You can't just be silent, because you're not validating your audience. They've taken time out of their lives to come and see what you've done. They need to be allowed to know how it happened and why it happened and how it came about, because that's your give back to them for them validating you as an artist.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. I think you are a font of knowledge because you've been there and you've done it successfully. I have a question for you, and I hope I don't put you on the spot, but how are you planning to sell the remainder of, because you've had approximately 40 books sold on the day. You produced 100, correct? Do you have any thoughts on how you're going to go about selling those?
Yes, I've done some material. I've fortunately been working with a graphic designer. I'm just going to hold up a poster.
Another beautiful poster, yes.
This poster is in my local, several of my local restaurants, local gift shop, my local IGA supermarket. And so this tells about the book and also the exhibition. And I've also produced some collateral material, which I've just done 1,000 letterbox drops. So I've got an A5 one for letterbox, and I've got an A4 version for countertop at local businesses, so that they can hand them out. People continue to see it over the period of time.
Rob, you're amazing. I think that you have just, I mean, this is gold, everybody. Like I can tell you what I research and learn, but Rob's telling you what he has experienced. And I feel you're doing such a good job. And I'd love to find out how all of your promotions and collateral and the letterbox drop. I mean, that's the other beauty of being local. You can appeal to local customers.
Well, that's what I felt my target market was the people with the surrounding the streets that surrounded this dam and wetland. They were the most obvious people because that's their virtual backyard. It's where their kids go and play. It's where they go and picnic. It's where they go and wander. And when under this COVID environment, it's where people have been doing all their exercise, not being able to go too far from home. So I felt that these surrounding streets were my absolute target market. So I've been very focused on being local centric in my marketing.
Well, thank you, Rob. You've proven that. It sounds like you've also put a lot of effort into planning, and that's what I talked about way back at the start. So thank you very much. Stay there with us in case I have some more questions for you. But we're right on, we're getting close to past, and I'm worried that I said we would have a Q&A section. So what I'm going to do is just briefly scroll back through some of the questions that have come up. So Brittany asked about who the ex-Rolling Stone person was in the courses. So that is Rachel Nepfer and the ACP, so Australian Centre for Photography, which is at acp.org.au. They are a great resource.
Sorry, Libby, the name of that course was The Edit.
The Edit with Rachel Nepfer, and Stories and Projects with Martin.
Yeah.
But you'll find that a lot of your local centres for photography, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide, a lot of them will host similar courses. So check them out. But of course, ACP's is online, and you can do that from wherever you are. Okay, I'm just scrolling back through again. Sorry about the screen freezing. Can you please? Okay. Okay. 1 second. Oops, we've got a new message. Let me see if that's a question. Oh, thank you so much. No problem. Okay, I know there was a question earlier about somebody who was producing a book that had photos and interviews. And I think there was concern about that maybe not being a great combo. I think it's a great combo. I didn't mention it before, but to me, a photo book, what is it that you can do with the book format that you can't do with an exhibition or a single print? And the thing is that you can enhance it and you can add content to the meaning, and you can add text. Now, there's a big debate that goes on when I sit in on these Photobook Award judging sessions that I participate in, never as the judge, just as an observer. And the debate about whether there should be text in a photo book is always a hot topic. My personal thoughts are that text adds context to a book. And if you are wanting to appeal to an audience who may not know anything about you, about your project, about the subject in your images, giving them some text to hold their hand, to guide them into what it is you're trying to say is important. That can be done simply, well, a title is very important. You know, location, time frame, a foreword helps, because if you can convey what it is that inspired you to do the project, that's the kind of information people like to know. Some people get experts to write something that's about the topic, the related topic, as we saw with the Black and Blue, when they got Tim Winton and Peter Garrett to make a comment that was relevant to the book. Captions can be, if you're not into writing big blocks of text, and you don't have to, but I don't think big blocks of text are a problem either. Whatever adds to the meaning of the book, I think is helpful. Just be careful when you add the text into, I think that's really when you need to speak to a graphic designer. I've seen so many brilliant photojournalists who have put books together, or a few, I should say, who have the most incredible images to put together, but then the layout and the text kind of underwhelms the importance of the images. And if they'd just employed a few design, techniques, or got a designer on board, it would have made a big difference. And look, I've got that list of designers that I will share with everybody. And you know, a designer, the price range will vary. Don't be scared by some of the prices. These guys are experts, you know, they deserve to be paid for their expertise, but you can do your own homework and learn about design theory, and you can still do a good job on your own, but just do a bit of research. Look at the photo books that you love. Go to the local bookstore and see what the photo book designs are like in there. So I think interviews, and the interviews element is such a beautiful thing in the context of portraits. I love to learn about what the subjects, what makes them tick, or why they're sitting there. So I'm working on a book that has photos and interviews. Have I shot myself in the foot? Jennifer, you have totally not shot yourself in the foot. When I send you the email after this with the video of Amir's book, it's called I Am Beautiful, I Am Woman. I think it's the what we learn about the women, and in very kind of poetic, just a short list of I am, they describe themselves. I am such and such, I'm strong, I am powerful. And then they make a comment at the end. And it's, I think concise text is great to have. Let's face it, our attention spans these days are pretty short, which is why everybody loves social media. So if you're going to put text in, keep it succinct. Or if you do want to, like, let's say in the instance of your book, Rob, if you wanted to add more information about the wetlands, that's fine, but maybe put it at the back so people can read that at their leisure. We have another. Tony is asking, what's the impact of COVID-19 on photo book selling? Oh, was that photo book selling or production? I don't really have much to say about that other than I know, okay, here's something for you. I will make a comment, which is that we have seen a surge in orders because people have had time to sit down with their photo collections and start organizing them and going through them, and that has inspired them to create the books. I can only imagine if people are spending more time at home, that they will have more time to sit down and pick up a book. I've heard of, actually, here's another comment that is relevant. I know of one of the major photography magazines in the country that is seeing a surge in subscribers at the moment too, because people are sitting at home and looking for activities to do at home. So in terms of our production timeline, there was a little hiccup, but you know, as Lisa mentioned, if you're booking if you want to produce a volume order with us, you have to book into the production schedule anyway. Shall we, I'm just going to drop to the bottom now. If you've got any questions, it might be better to reiterate them at the bottom, because I'm scrolling through and I'll see them faster if I just go to the current messages. So just let me drop back here. What are your thoughts? Hold on. It will be much easier. Oh, Peter Sharp, you've provided us with some comments here. It will be much easier to secure a trade publisher to support your project if you have a story or message that supports the images, in my opinion and experience. And yes, your opinion and experience is greatly appreciated, Peter. If you'd like to learn more about Peter's, like the process and the experience he had, I actually have written a blog post about that too. Momento Pro has a blog called The Momentum, and it's at blog.momentopro.com.au, or there is a link on our homepage and in our top navigation menu. And you'll find plenty more information about people who've produced self-published books, the design elements, and basically over the coming weeks and months, I plan to convert what we've been talking about today into blog posts about each section. So the editing process, the design process, how do you price it, how do you sell it, how do you distribute it. So keep your eye on our newsletters, and this information will be delivered in you know, bite-sized chunks. Peter also agreed with me on the working with a professional journalist or copywriter. If you're looking to include copy in your book, just as important as using a designer, in my opinion. Here, Peter, totally agree. Likewise with an editor and a curator. Rob, you spoke very highly of Rachel's contribution to your book. And it's, you know, even if you don't get a professional editor, I highly, highly recommend you creating some, what they call in the industry, dummy books, like created, if you're using our software or whatever, print a copy out at home if you want. We do unbound pages too, if you want to keep it cost effective, but print a copy out and share it with family and friends. You need fresh eyes, people who have necessarily have no knowledge of the book or emotional attachment, and they'll be very honest and they'll tell you what does and doesn't work. And sometimes as the creator, you're so close to it and you can't see it yourself, but show it around. How do you ensure the color and light is accurate to what you see on your computer? Well,
I can jump in on that if you like.
Oh, sure. And,
Well,
and I also have my 24/7 tech support here if I need any additional comments.
If you're working from home and you do have a color calibrated monitor, then that should ensure that your images look exactly as they are on screen when they're printed in the book. But if you don't, what Libby just said, make sure you get a sample book done or sample pages done. I fell into that trap. I don't have a color calibrated monitor, and my Apple Mac shows my pictures backlit and they're very bright. But sometimes when they go to print, they end up looking quite dark. So it is something that you have to be very mindful of when you go to print. But the service that Momento Pro offer with the unbound pages are a very cost-effective way to ensure you don't end up with a book that doesn't look the way you wanted it to.
And sorry, Rob, I was slightly distracted then, but just in case you didn't mention it, we also have ICC profiles that people can download for each of the different paper stocks. And Tony, I can see you asking some questions about should we convert images to CMYK? No, I'm going to call in my partner at Work and Play, Jeff, who is the technical guru in this outfit.
Hey everyone. Short answer, no, don't convert your images to CMYK. We specialize, if you're working with us, that is, we specialize in printing books of photography. Nearly all other printers out there will take CMYK. We need the files in RGB. Specifically, we prefer Adobe RGB. It's not as hard as it sounds. Bottom line is your photos will have all been edited in RGB. Leave them in RGB. If you're using our software or our InDesign plugin, your color management will all be handled for you. It'll convert your files to Adobe RGB if they're not in Adobe RGB, and it'll leave them in Adobe RGB if they're already there. If you haven't yet done your editing and output it from Lightroom or whatever you're using, it'll give you one step in quality if you stick to Adobe RGB for the whole journey. The ICC profiles, look, they're a good guide. They're not gospel. What Rob's done with the test unbound pages is the best way to go. There's nothing better than just seeing it on paper rather than trying to have your screen emulate the paper.
And Tony, if I'm correct, you're in New Zealand, in a very remote part of New Zealand. And I should also mention our lovely service rep who is based in Wellington, New Zealand. That's Jackie Lentel. And for specific questions around, file preparation, just like Lise would, you can communicate with Lise about some of those details. Jackie would be more than happy to speak to you about it too. And I know that there's people out there with varying levels of knowledge and skill when it comes to color. So, and there sometimes can be very specific details to talk about. So I think they're best directed to Jackie and Lisa.
Tony, just to your second part of your question there, Pro Photo, we don't recommend Pro Photo. The reason is the gamut is so much bigger than the print gamut that you're going to get that you're essentially wasting the accuracy of the ICC profile. You're best to go straight to Adobe RGB. or as I say, if you're sRGB already and all your work's done, don't worry, you're not going to lose anything. But if you go to ProPhoto, we have had issues in the past, especially in the fine gradients of skies and the like, where you start to see some posterizing or stepping in the colors that comes about from going from ProPhoto to eventually CMYK. Whereas if you stick to Adobe RGB, that won't be a problem. If you're very fussy about your color and your accuracy, go to a TIFF. JPEG works fine for 99% of our customers though. So nearly everybody I ever speak to goes via JPEG at 90% quality or plus.
Right. Well, at this juncture, it's about 20 to 1. And I think that from what I can tell, we've answered most of the questions that have been raised. The last one, Tony, you did also ask how you could find out about, where do you sign up for the newsletter? Once you join Momento Pro, you'll be automatically signed up to the newsletter, but you might also like to go and subscribe to or start following the blog. And I also suggest almost every day, I will post on our Momento Pro, and we have a separate Australia and New Zealand Photobook Award feed. And I post tips, ideas, inspiration, people's projects. But if you want the very photo books, like for self-publishing photo books, I would suggest you definitely follow the Australia and New Zealand Photobook Award feed. Once again, I'll include all of the links that I've referred to. I'm going to send you an email that has all of those in it after next week sometime, when I get a time to post the webinar as well. So don't worry, you'll have that information. We've just received a comment from Brittany. This may be beyond, but I thought I'd ask anyway. If you have people in your books, what sort of contract do you need to be able to have in your photo book if you're selling it? Okay, this sounds like model release or release contracts. I'd like to say that's not my area of expertise. That's probably something that you would find more through Rob. Is that something that they covered in any of the courses you took?
Yes, you do need a model release if you're going to have people in your books.
Right. And do you know, is there any kind of template, or did they provide you with a template at the course, or is there anywhere you can point us? No drama if you can't. You
can get it straight off the internet. It's easily downloadable. Just type in media release, people.
Model release. Yeah. Okay. And thank you, Paul O'Ellen, for your lovely comments. And if anybody, I don't believe there are any other questions coming in, and I think it's probably time to sign off, but thank you. I've enjoyed sharing some of my newfound research with you. We do have I thought I had one more screen. As a result of preparing for this webinar, we've decided to create a new service that we're going to provide at Momento, which will be a short consultation with me for a fee, a small fee, but a reasonable fee, that I would be happy to communicate with you about your specific project and advise on, any funding, all the different topics that we covered today. So I haven't started it yet. I need to get it set up. Give me a month or so, but I will include all that information in our newsletters. Anything that's relevant, I will always include and inform people of in our newsletters. So thank you very much for sharing all of this with us, and it will be available to review at your leisure as of next week. And thank you again, Rob, for your insight, and also to Lise, who isn't on screen right now, but is the guru when it comes to our volume orders. So thank you very much, everyone.